called MCRT. And the other is a newer program called Trust. And those are either provided through county staff or through county contracts. The MCRT stands for Mobile Crisis Response Team, and it was started in 2018. There are two separate programs, one serving adults, one serving youth. And they have teams that serve the entire county with both a phone screening and a field assessment and intervention that are intended to provide an alternative to police response. The phone assessment is available through a call line that anybody can use, a person in crisis or a family member or a community member or a member of a police department. What we have heard is that there isn't broad awareness in the community of that resource. And we've also heard that the existing teams are not sufficient to provide 24/7 and immediate response to the entire county when calls come in, and especially as there have been an increase in calls with mental health issues that have become more intense and numerous during the pandemic. It's been necessary for that service to triage calls, and they aren't able to get into the field for all of the families and individuals that they would want to. I think a lot of that led to Supervisor Smitty and asking the board to support creating a new team, a fourth team that would be based in and focused on serving North County and the West Valley cities. And that was approved by the Board of Supervisors earlier this month. And it's the county staff's anticipation that they will be able to get that staffed by the end of July. And so that will be a really great increase in capacity for that model of alternative response for mental health crisis. In addition, last August, you heard about a new initiative that sounds awfully similar. It's community mobile response, and that became named Trust, which stands for Trusted Response Urgent Support Team. And that model is even further removed from police involvement by what they anticipate to be a much broader community engagement in raising awareness about the program, promoting the access to the program so that there is an easily accessed community phone line for people to call on this Trust program that would then respond in the field through a specially equipped van and would be staffed with social workers and mental health workers and emergency medical response professionals, and not with law enforcement, and would really kind of work as a network that had services both before and after crisis that are attempting to be more preventive in nature and more holistic in working with the family and working with community resources. And so that has been, an RFP was put out for the organization to run the Trust program, and that's currently being negotiated by county staff with whomever the vendor or vendors were that responded to the RFP. And they're expecting to be able to bring contracts to the County Board of Supervisors by July for approval, and then expecting that it might be up to 3 months after that for the vans and staff to be ready to be deployed. And so those are the two county programs. What I also wanted to update you on is the city's police department behavioral service unit program, which uses a team of trained law enforcement sworn officers from Mountain View, as well as one of our community service officers who is an associate therapist, and having that person be available with the team to respond to calls that come in with mental health issues indicated, and also to review cases that have been responded to identify where follow-up opportunities might be available to try to connect people into resources so that they are not just being dispatched, back into the community or without having ongoing opportunities for having their needs be met. Because I think what the police department had been seeing, that there are a few people who wind up being served multiple times or being responded to in crisis mode by the police multiple times. And so it would be, our effort through this program to have people channeled into supportive programs that are more appropriate to meet their needs. So those updates, the work plan item calls not just for receiving updates, but to kind of explore these models and to find ways to strengthen them and help facilitate community input into them. So similar to the recommendation on the last item, what staff is recommending is that you create a subcommittee of your members to identify opportunities to engage the public and provide input on these different program models. And there's some bullet points in the memo that I'll briefly summarize. And that could include, meeting first with police department staff to really get an understanding of what are the nature of mental health crisis calls in Mountain View, the volume and types of issues and the ways that the police department currently typically responds to those, monitoring the development of the county's efforts on those two programs that I talked about, identifying opportunities that the PSAB as a body plus you as facilitating broader community input could review and provide input to the programs, and then more ongoing than that, making suggestions for how to raise community awareness so that the members of the public who might really benefit from these programs know about them. And then any updates and recommendations would be brought to the PSAB from the subcommittee. So that ends my presentation. And so, Madam Chair, if it works for you, you might invite questions and deliberation on the substance of that memo, and then seek any public input or comment rather on the items, and then maybe bring it back to the commission to take any action on appointing subcommittees for both 5.2 and 5.1.
That sounds good. It looks like Member Tang already has her hand raised, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, making sure my hand is lowered. I had a couple questions. The first question is, was it mentioned which cities or neighborhoods are included in the North County / West Valley team?
I believe that the focus point will be for North County, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View. Okay. And I know which cities are typically considered the West Valley cities, but I don't know that level of detail has been provided yet by the county.
Okay, thank you. And then let me try that again. Is there information on plans to expand awareness for the community mobile response programs and or integrating them with like 911 dispatch? Is there info on that, or is that just something that we're supposed to, or something that the subcommittee will be expected to provide input on?
I think understanding the ways that calls come in to the various places that they might come, dispatch if they're calling in to the police, or to the county behavioral health lines if they're coming into the county, And then what's the interface with police? I think for trust, for example, there's no dispatch link at all. It's a completely separate, and both of them are completely separate phone lines. And the intention is that there wouldn't be any police involvement unless, upon, work in the field, it was determined that there was a level of safety threat that required that response. And so neither of those two county models are proposed to integrate with dispatch, but I think the kinds of questions you're raising are really great ones that I can see the subcommittee trying to map that out and better understand it and understand what the PSAB might want to know, such that that would inform future updates and presentations to the PSAB.
Okay, thank you.
Member Brodowski?
I have a question. It seems to me like we have two services that are working right now. One is our police department, and the other is the first one. I've forgotten what you call it.
MCRT.
Thank you. And then we have the trust organization, which will be probably working by the end of the year. Do we want these to coordinate? Is the idea to have two places where we will make public and publicize a couple of phone numbers so that anyone who has a mental health crisis in his home doesn't have to call the police? Is that the point? And the other question that goes with this is, what do you do with a case like this when there is some violence or a weapon involved? So
I would like to start and then ask for part of that question to be answered by Captain Canfield. I think you're exactly right that publicizing and helping the community know about what are the resources that are available, and making sure they have enough information so they can choose. Not only do they know about it, but they know when might they want to call one number versus another number. And I do trust that there is going to be coordination on the county's end between programs as well. And in terms of how do we know and how does it work if police do need to be involved in a call, I'd like to ask Captain Canfield to answer.
I did it. I started speaking on mute. Sorry. So I don't know what the procedures and protocols are in place or will be in place for the different models, but with some confidence, I can say that there'll be a screening mechanism, much like the MCRT does, in which there's a conversation about the type of threat, the type of crisis that the person's in, and the presence or absence of weapons. There are those are kind of trigger questions that shift the need of the response. And for the MCRT, although they do call us for the vast majority of their actions, we often, if the threat level is lower, that communication is made and we are in the background and allow MCRT to work in the foreground. How each of these different organizations will evaluate and respond for threats is really going to probably vary slightly on their training expertise and focus. I suspect that all of them, if there's a significant threat or a weapon, they will not be responding without some level of law enforcement. However, someone who is irate and maybe a homeless person or somebody in mental crisis that looks intimidating and is yelling and acting erratic, and although that may sometimes be a law enforcement response, in these types of circumstances with trained clinicians, they may evaluate those and determine that something along that level does not require a law enforcement presence initially. I think that would be a fairly safe assumption.
okay, thank you.
Member Wang?
I just have a quick clarifying question for the expanded supervisor approved expansion to North County for the response for youth. Is that going to be through Uplift like it currently is for MCRT, or is it going to be like a different kind of program?
Thank you, Commissioner Wang. That's a good question. The current provider for the youth services that the county makes available through CMRT is Uplift. It's a community-based nonprofit organization. And my understanding is that they would be looking to expand through that provider, but I'm not involved in some of those mechanics. And that's an item that they are going to bring back in April for a more detailed recommendation for the board to approve.
Thank you.
I had a question about the behavioral services unit's activity to date. There seems to be a number of cases that have come through. It was like 751. Did those come through 911? And dispatch decided that the BSU team would go out, or could you walk us through how that works?
Yes, I can handle that. So the way that those cases are correlated and selected for our BSU unit to review is through our CAD system or our computer system. And it's actually done by the officers in the field. So the officers in the field, in the notes of the call, will create just a hashtag, and they'll just hashtag it CIT. And that doesn't mean that there's a diagnosis or there's clinical connection that said the person is in mental health crisis. But from a layman's perspective, it appears that there's a mental health crisis worthy of a follow-up. Often, these are cases of a desire for self-harm or mental illness connection to wanting to harm other people. All those types of cases are hashtagged CIT in our CAD system. And then that BSU unit reviews, they pull all of that data much easier because of that hashtag. And then they review each of those cases to see which ones fit the need of the unit or the ability of the unit for their follow-up.
Okay. All right. So the BSU team is really involved in the follow-up, not in the initial call.
That is correct. Now, many of our BSU, so our CNT, our crisis negotiation team, has really been not exclusively repurposed because we still respond out to significant incidents with them. However, they predominantly now work with our CSO, who's listed in the report, to do the follow-up for those people in need that are, whose cases have been hashtag CIT. They're often also the officers in the field responding. So although they are the ones doing the follow-up, there's significant intent when available, when they're working, and when we have CIT officers or CNT, crisis negotiation team officers available, they will be the ones responding to people in mental health crises. So even though they're also often the ones doing that follow-up. But if they're available, we will send those people first.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay. And remind me how many officers are on CNT or trained for that?
We've recently just about doubled the team. So forgive me for not having an exact number, but I would say somewhere around 16 to 18 people.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Other questions or points of clarification from the board at this time for either Captain Canfield or Assistant City Manager Ramberg? Don't think I see any hands. So with that, would any members of the public like to make comments on this item? Let me take a look and see. Okay, it looks like we have 3 hands raised. So why don't we go ahead and do 3 minutes per person and start with Bruce England. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Do you hear me now? Okay, that's interesting. I don't hear you.
Yes, go ahead.
Now I do. Okay. Bruce England speaking for MVCPRA, tonight. I don't have a lot to say. I went through it and I commented on it and sent some of my comments in to a few of the committee members, but I'll also send it to whoever winds up on the committee and to Audrey so she can see it too. It sounds like in your discussion so far that there are a lot of questions about the flow. This happens and this happens and this happens, and maybe that needs to be clarified better for the subcommittee once that work starts. My questions are mainly about the data behind some of the assertions. So when there are incidents and referrals and things like that, what does that actually mean, as opposed to saying that there's an increase or that there are urgent requests? What actually does that mean on the ground? And then also, key point is the age ranges for the various programs. That was confusing in the beginning. I think it's still confusing. If there were a table in there that just basically said from this range through this, or rather from this age through this age, these programs apply, things like that. But the way the report is written, it's spread out across the report instead of put in one place. And then I just have other clarifying questions here too, but I'll hold those for when the subcommittee is formed and to forward those at that point. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public speaker, a member of the public who's speaking, I should say, is B. Hansen. Go ahead, Ms. Hansen. I think you might be muted, Ms. Hansen. Ms. Hansen, are you perhaps on mute?
There, you're hearing me now? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, that took a while. I stayed engaged here because of this I noticed this topic on the agenda, and it's really close to my heart. Because my sister was schizophrenic, and it was really, I have to say that her death was really the responsibility of the Chicago city government, the way that they treated schizophrenic people, and that they did not stay engaged as you are planning or have already done. This is really encouraging what you're doing. I just wanted to tell you that people like that, I'm not sure how many schizophrenics are actually in this area, but they will be those repeat people that Audrey was talking about. And they're very, very difficult, and they make you angry. There's nothing you can do for them because it is a physical brain disease. And I'm sure that the officers are being trained about that. There's also a problem, a long-term problem, where they will keep being problematic until they have a place to go every day. And that's what happened to my sister. Rahm Emanuel closed down all the mental health clinics. She had no place to go. She ended up on the street and she died. So I wanted to relay that first, to compliment you for doing this, and to say, please follow up with the families of people who are in that position. I think it will help you to understand better.
Thank you. We have one more member of the public who would like to speak. Tim McKenzie, please go ahead.
Hi, Tim McKenzie, he, him pronouns. It's great to hear about these things starting to pick up. It's good to see the county leading the way. It's a little crazy that about 2018, I think, was when these programs were starting out. And it's clear that there's really a dearth of resources. We need to invest more in it. And I'd love to see Mountain View sort of follow in the county's footsteps and think about what it would look like for us to have it like part of the city dedicated to this professional city staff in the same way that could liaise with the county staff and all these programs. I don't imagine that would be happening immediately. That we're still getting things off the ground at the county level, but sometimes there can be things that fall through the cracks. We're just getting right now something up in North County, so it'd be great to see this also at the municipal level. And I just sort of want to plant that seed as a thing for the subcommittee to consider.
Thank you. I'm just going to check and see if there's any other members of the public who would like to speak. I do not see any more hands raised at this point, so I'll now close public comment for this item. Do any PSAB members have further questions or comments? Member Tang, please go ahead.
Just clarifying, we're not acting on these tonight, are we? Or we're just receiving the recommendations?
So the action that we would like to do tonight on this is to form the subcommittee.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions at this point on this topic? If not, then I'd like to move towards actually discussing establishing a subcommittee for item 5.1. Is that right? What it was? I've lost my numbers. And then 5.2. And rather than me suggesting people, I would like to invite members of the board to express interest in either being part of the subcommittee for the traffic pedestrian stop analysis and what kind of data should be collected, how to involve community, or the mental health crisis response programs and how to understand how the county's evolving, how the city plays into that, and everything else that Assistant City Manager Ramberg outlined. So why don't I just go around and ask each member which one you might be interested in, or if it's neither, that's also okay. And I will start with Member Sandhu. Do you have interest in serving on either of these subcommittees?
I just had a feeling my name would be called first, but it's all right. No, actually, not this time.
Okay.
I'm pretty swamped, so thank you. Thank you for asking.
Of course. Member Wang, would you have interest in either of these subcommittees?
Yes, I think I would be interested in being part of the mental health response subcommittee, but I do also want to bring up that I don't know where I will be after September of this year. So I'm just kind of wondering what the timeline for that is, because I do want to be able to do a good job with it and stay involved.
That's very thoughtful, Member Wang. Thank you for bringing that up. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, do you see any challenges in case Ms. Wang wants to go off to college and do that kind of good stuff?
We would love to have as much of your involvement and input for as long as we can, Commissioner Wang. So I don't see any reason you shouldn't put yourself forward for a committee.
Thank you. Member Tang, can we interest you in either of these subcommittees?
I would be happy to be involved with either one of them.
Okay. Does that potentially mean both? Or I'm pushing it.
I don't know if that is allowed. I mean, if it comes down to it, sure.
All right. Thank you for being so open. I appreciate that. Member Langton?
Yeah, I could probably do the traffic stop data one.
Okay. Okay, I'm just jotting down notes here. Okay. Great. Vice Chair Frink?
I'm happy to serve on either or.
Okay. Okay, Member Brodowski?
I would, if drafted, I would prefer to serve on the traffic stop committee.
Okay. Okay, Brodowski. Okay. So, did I get a chance to call on everybody? Okay. So if I have it correct, for mental health, I have member Wang. For traffic stop, I have member Langton and Brodowski. And for either, I have member Frink and member Tang. Member Frink or member Tang, do you have a preference?
Before we move forward, can you please expound on your own preferences? Just
That's right. I should ask myself. I'm happy to serve if any committee needs another member, but I'm just about to start a new job, and I'm conscious that I need to reserve some bandwidth for that. So
I'm in the so
you're in the
sorry.
same, yeah.
In the
And you all know me, and I don't respect subcommittee boundaries, and I go off and do my own thing anyway, right? So we all know that's going to happen. So no, I'm just kidding. I behave now. So member Tang, if you had a preference, which one would it be? Because it looks like we have space on both.
I mean, I really am happy with either one.
Okay.
Don't put me on both, please. I don't have bandwidth for that.
No. Well, how about I propose this? How about member Wang, member Tang, and myself for mental health? And then member Frink, member Langton, and member Brodowski for traffic stop. Does that seem okay? I think member Frink, the traffic stop one might be less intense, and I will have a little more bandwidth while my job ramps up. And maybe that's a good balance. Unless you really want to do mental health. You're on mute.
I'm here to help, so it's all good.
Okay.
I have a pretty crazy spring coming up, so with basketball and yada yada.
Yeah, it sounded like the traffic stop one wouldn't be so time intensive if we understood it correctly, and it could go over time. So maybe that's more suitable for the basketball schedule. And member Wang and member Tang, if you'll be patient with me as I'm trying to figure out how to fit a full-time job into my current schedule, that would be great. Okay. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, is there any more that we need to do at this point, or are our subcommittees established?
We don't need to vote. I'll just want to confirm back what I heard, which is that the subcommittee on traffic stop and pedestrian data would be Commissioners Brodowski, Vice Chair Frink, and Commissioner Langton.
Mm-hmm.
And the subcommittee on mental health alternative crisis response models would be Chair Ayer, Commissioner Wang, and Commissioner Tang.
Sound
Very good. Thank you all for your service.
Appreciate that.
Also, Chair, when member Wang has to go off, if she has to go off, someplace else I can probably take her spot then.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Frink. I appreciate it. And member Sandhu, we haven't forgotten about you. So as your schedule lightens up, please do let us know if
absolutely I will. Yes,
if you can take on anything more. Okay.
I will do so. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay. All right. So we are now on. Oh my goodness, I have too many pieces of paper. Just a second here. We are now on point 5.3, which is the PD complaint data quarterly report. So Captain Canfield, back over to you. This is the first time we're doing this, so looking forward to it.
Yes, so this is the second time we're doing this. This will be for Q4. And if you recall, we did a previous quarter at our last meeting, and actually we put in all 3 quarters. So this will be Q4 for complaint data, as well as a year-end summary, if you will. And allow me to share my screen. Is that coming through okay?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said, this is based on the work plan item of reviewing our quarterly complaint data. This is Q4 for our complaints and the year-end data. And just wanted to go over some of the data sets and kind of the background on the complaint data process, since it's been a little while since we've done it. Just as an overview, again, this was part of the work plan item. And by doing this quarterly, we're allowing for comparisons, both, over larger over time comparisons, and then any kind of short-term changes as well. The data that you are receiving all comes directly to me from the professional standards unit, which is our IA unit, which is Sergeant Matt Atkins, for those of you who know him, and he reports directly to the office of the chief. As you recall, a lot of these items are sensitive in nature or are personnel items that we can't share specifics on. So to the extent that they need to be, they have been anonymized. And the intent, again, is not to deep dive into specific complaints, but to give a general overview of the complaints that we're receiving for you to have access to those. So just as an overview, the types of data sets that we're collecting, we wanted to identify if they're formal IAs, which are given IA numbers, or if they're miscellaneous complaints. And the miscellaneous identification numbers, they're given to lower level complaints that come in, but we still feel it's important to track those. And those that come in go through Sergeant Atkins' office, the PSU office. Another data set was whether the complaints were generated internally or externally. And given the nature of the importance of reporting inappropriate behavior within an organization and the significance that that's playing in law enforcement, we wanted to make sure that that was something that was captured for you to review. Next was whether or not our subjects of the complaints were our professional staff or our sworn, which are often just referred to as officers, but it could be any rank of sworn staff, so professional staff or sworn. And then the nature of the complaint. And we've broken these down into some general categories. As you see, vehicle operations, law violations, policy violations, other than rude or discourteous behavior. Of course, rude or discourteous behavior, excessive or unreasonable force, and racial bias or discrimination, and just a general catch-all for anything else of other. And I should say, if anybody has any questions as I'm going through these, I'm trying to go through the refresher a little bit quickly. But if you'd like me to elaborate on anything, please just let me know. The next was whether or not a complaint was lodged anonymously. We absolutely accept anonymous complaints, given that there could be fear of reprisal, or someone may have warrants or have fear of contact with law enforcement for a number of reasons. Obviously, we accept anonymous complaints, but we thought you would want to know how they came in as well. And then the next was whether or not a formal complaint was requested versus an informal complaint. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how the complaint will end if we believe that it needs to be formal, but just kind of to track the gauge of the complainant's intent or desire. And then almost lastly is the disposition. Move my little box with your faces. The disposition of the case, and we have the standards that are identified in our policy of unfounded, not substantiated, exonerated, sustained, no finding, and then we added pending. And as you recall, pending is for complaints that stretch between quarters, which often they will do. And then after our meeting last time, there was a request to include the level of a complaint, whether it's a major or a minor, from the board. So we went ahead and included the data or created a new data set for major or minor internal affairs complaints. And just to kind of differentiate between the two, A minor complaint tends to be either result in something from a disciplinary standpoint, something smaller like a letter in a file or a record of conversation, whereas a major complaint would result in something being taken away from the officer, such as pay or a specialty position, and could even go all the way, it's a large spectrum, could even go all the way up to a termination. And with that, I just wanted to go ahead and highlight the Q4 complaints. So you'll see that we had 6 IAs and 1 miscellaneous number. Of those, 3 were generated internally and 4 were generated externally. All of them were on our sworn staff, and they ranged really between 3 different categories of policy, law, and rudeness, with 4 policy, 2 law, and 1 rudeness. None of the complainants were anonymous in these cases, and all of them requested formal complaints. Of the complaints, we have 4 are still pending, 2 are unfounded, and 1 is substantiated. And as you look at our last data set, the level of complaint, we have 3 major complaints and 3 minor complaints. And for a year-end review, so quarters 1 through 4, there was a total of 17 complaints, 6 of them falling in that miscellaneous number and 7 being IAs. 6 were generated internally, 11 externally, 14 on sworn staff, and 3 on professional staff. 9 of those, the vast majority, were policy violation allegations. 2 were for rudeness, 3 were for law violations, 1 bias, 1 unreasonable force, and 1 other. 1 of those complaints was anonymous, and the other 16 were not. As you can see, 14 were formal complaints requested, and 3 were informal complaints. The dispositions for these were 6 of them were sustained, 4 are still pending, 3 were unfounded, 2 were unsustained, and 2 had no findings. The level of complaints were 12 minors and 5 major complaints. And that's really the summary of both the quarter and now the year for 2021. And I can take any questions that the board may have.
Okay. Captain Canfield, would you go back to the current quarter review? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay. I do have one quick question to start. So out of the 17 complaints that happened for the year, 7 of them happened in Q4. Is that a sign of things to come for 2022, or is that just an active time for complaints traditionally? I was curious. It seems very stacked towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it is stacked towards the end of the year, and that's fairly anomalous. I would not say that that's normal. It's neither normal to have that many complaints in a quarter, nor for them all to fall at the end of the year. I can tell you that we've been in conversation with the city manager's office, with Audrey, and with the city attorney's office and HR. They're aware of the major complaints and some and most of the minor complaints. And we don't see a significant pattern related to these cases.
Okay.
But it's definitely something that we're paying attention to. And should there be patterns that arise, that's certainly something that we'll take action on and address, what the nature of it, whether it's a training or performance behavior supervision, whatever it could be. But at this point, it doesn't appear that these things are directly connected to each other, either through personnel or kind of background of the complaint, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Member Brodowski?
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is, how many different individual officers were involved in all of these, or is each one a distinct person?
So each of these is a distinct incident. And in fact, you could, there are some of these incidents are against more than, or some of these incidents are allegations against the same officer. So one officer is mentioned more than one time in these complaints. But I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. If that could be a data set that we start looking at. If there's a way, maybe I might see if there's a recommendation later offline for how best to collect that type of data or provide it, perhaps from research fellow Stevenson or somebody else. But that's certainly, if that's an interest of the board, that we could look at how best to both anonymize it still, but provide that information to you.
Yeah, it seems to me that that would be something important for the police department to know. If you have one officer who's showing up 3 or 4 times in a year, that's a red flag. I suspect that you know that anyway. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're aware both that that an officer showing up multiple times can be an indicator of larger problems, both with that officer, the organization, their training, some other aspect. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case, but we're certainly cognizant of it, and it is not lost on the chief's office, Sergeant Atkins, or the city as a whole. And it's something that we are paying attention to, I assure you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
And Member Brodowski, did you have a second question?
No, it got swallowed up in that.
Oh,
Thank
it did. Oh, okay. All right. Member Tang?
I have so many questions. I feel like every quarter we're going to need like a frequently asked questions section, just like as reminders of like what the terms mean. So I'm seeing like maybe some overlap between like level of complaint, like IA/MI, and then like formal or non-formal complaint. Like if it's a major like level complaint, does that mean that it has to be a formal complaint? And then does that mean that well, actually, no, I'll stop at that question. If it's a major complaint, does that mean that it has to be like a formal complaint?
So a major could come in, it could be initiated as an informal from the community, and then upon its review, it's determined that it needs to be changed to a major investigation. If sustained, if the allegation sustained could result in something being taken away from that officer, then we would change it. Even if the person wanted an informal complaint, like if the request was for an informal, I just want the officer talked to, but the nature of the allegation was more significant that made that an inappropriate response, then we would change it to a major. I definitely see that there is some redundancy, and I'm open, obviously, to shifting and adjusting the data sets to kind of best meet the needs and expectations of the board. So there is some overlap, and if some of these things are less significant to you, we're certainly happy to readjust and look at kind of retooling, both for kind of whatever.
Oh, I don't mean anything by it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Absolutely. So the short answer is there is a lot of overlap, but they are slightly different.
Okay. Another question. If something comes from internal affairs, does that necessarily mean that it has to be a formal complaint as well? Because I could see like a miscellaneous identification number could be informal or formal, but actually I think when you say documentation type, that slide says formal internal affairs complaints.
I think I understand. So if it comes to the professional standards unit, it depends how it comes in. So if the person says they want it informally and it fits as a miscellaneous number, then they may put it there. If they want a formal complaint, but maybe the nature of it is unplausible, and they think that the officer is an alien or something along those lines, and there's no other allegation of inappropriate behavior, but they believe they're from another planet or something outlandish, then it might get an MI number, but it's still a formal complaint requested, but there is nothing to investigate essentially.
Oh, so it's just like whether or not the person initiating that complaint requested it to be formal. Oh, okay.
Correct. And then the manner in which we collect and correlate and report our internal affairs cases, they're given IA numbers, but we didn't want to miss out. We didn't want to not number our other types of cases that don't qualify as IAs. We still wanted to be able to collect that data and retain those. So those were created with an MI number.
Got it. Okay. I just might need a reminder each quarter.
I'm happy to
Thank
do
you.
it. I was trying to scale back all the, like going into a deep dive on all the data sets again, but I'm certainly happy to refresh and retool, you know, absolutely.
Does somebody need to go on mute? Okay, thank you. Member Sandhu?
Thank you, Chair. I think my simple question is this complaints, Captain Langton. I'm sorry, not Captain Langton. That's Derek. Sorry, Captain Canfield. Are this from the public itself? Are there any complaints whereby a police officer might bring up a complaint against another police officer? Are those included here?
That's an excellent question.
Thank you.
And we feel that it's an important metric to share with you. And that's that second column, which is origin. And it's whether it was generated internally within the organization or externally. But I will say, internally can also mean that we reviewed, let's say, a pursuit, and the pursuit was outside of policy, which generated an internal affairs complaint. It doesn't have to be another officer felt that the actions of another officer were inappropriate. It can still kind of run a gambit of things, but that certainly is where that would be included.
Member Langton?
Yeah, just as much as you may occasionally get an officer that has complaints multiple times. Does it occur that you have citizens that complain frequently?
Yes, that absolutely can happen. Some of those, if they're, if they're complaining regularly, we accept those complaints and they get statted like anything else. We don't dismiss them just because they're regular complainers. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're right. And they could be wrong 10 times and right on the 11th. So we're still going to collect those regardless. But back to the previous statement, we do see people that will write in with outlandish kind of concerns about officers with regards to supernatural abilities or, kind of indicators that I would think would be indicators of mental health concerns. If they don't also relate to performance issues, those are probably going to be kept, as an MI, but that person could still write and say that I was, assaulted by Captain Canfield, and Sergeant Atkins would send that to the chief.
And generally, does every complaint, are some complaints summarily dismissed and never tracked, or are they all registered as a complaint?
If they're coming in through the professional standards unit, they should be, and they are tracked. And those are going to be, often you'll see those as unfounded. They come in. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody can't retract and then stop being cooperative, or request not to interact with us anymore. That's their obligation, or rather their ability. But often if there's an allegation that is immediately refuted based on officer worn camera, witnesses, those types of things, and there's no question, then it can be unfounded. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this point from members of the board? I don't think I see any hand raise. So would any members of the public like to make comments on this item?
Mike, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me take a peek. It looks like there is one member of the public who would like to comment, so we'll go ahead and allow for 3 minutes. Tim McKenzie, please go ahead.
Hi all. I remember when this was being put on the word plan, it was kind of initiated because of a specific complaint that was occurring that of an officer pulling someone out of a vehicle, and could not speak about that because it's ongoing. I understand that. But a question that is related to this and is sort of relevant also in the news somewhat recently, there was Palo Alto paid a few $100,000 for when they came into Mountain View and sent a police dog onto someone. Well, I remember from MVPDX, I forget exactly the situation, but I believe it was that Mountain View pays into an insurance program along with local cities in case there is some sort of case that comes forward. I know that the budget is an upcoming item on the work plan in your agenda, and those are things that seemed related to me. And as a member of the public, I am curious in learning more about how much money we spend on that. And like, for example, how much money did we as Mountain View, I'm sure after Palo Alto had the situation with sending the attack dogs on someone in Mountain View, that our insurance premiums may have gone up. I'm speculating, but I'd like to learn a little bit more about that on a future agenda item. These seemed linked. I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands raised from the public at this time. Do any PSAB members have further questions or comments? Okay, I have one quick thing. I just wanted to sort of underline what Member Brodowski talked about. I would be interested if there were a way, Captain Canfield, to indicate if there were sort of officers that were registering multiple complaints in a given period of time or over a period of time. We could talk about how to do that, but I think that would be an item of interest if that were possible. Okay. And Mr. McKenzie, I'm not sure if I understood everything that you were saying, but if you want to drop me a note about what you'd like to see agendized, I could consider that. I'm not sure if I followed everything that you said. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we are moving on to item 5.4, which is the Public Safety Advisory Board meeting schedule. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, is that over to you? Great, take it away. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. So it relatively recent policy change to have each commission adopt its annual calendar. And we are starting a calendar year, and I've listed here the dates that are monthly with the exception of summer, when the council and most of the commissions take a break, and also December, and that our meeting schedule is the last Thursday of the month. And so the action before you now would be to adopt the calendar, and then these dates can be posted on the PSAB webpage.
Okay. All right. Would that be through a motion and a second? Okay.
Yes, please.
Has everyone had a chance to look at those dates? Okay. Could I have a motion to go ahead and approve the dates for that calendar? Member Brodowski?
Oppose.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to clarify, we are meeting from February through November, but we also have 2 months off at Christmas in the summer. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the meeting dates are today's meeting, March, April, May, June, then a break, September, October, November, and then no December.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Could I have a motion to approve this calendar if there are no
Yes,
more?
I do.
I
Thank
second.
you, Member Sandhu. Thank you, Member Brodowski. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, would you like a roll call vote?
Yes, please. Commissioner Brodowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandhu,
Aye.
Commissioner Wang,
Aye.
Chair Iyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Tang,
Aye.
Commissioner Langton,
Aye.
Vice Chair Frank.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. All right. I realized I did not ask for public comment on this. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, do I need to go back and do that now?
Yes, I apologize for not catching that. You may do that.
I didn't think anyone would have anything to say, but I would like to give, if any members of the public would like to comment on this, please raise your hand. Oh, we do actually have a comment. Bruce, sorry about that. Bruce England, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, no, we always have comments out here in the public. So
Okay, thank you.
you can count on that. Yeah, on this item, I'm a little concerned, speaking on behalf of MVCPRA, that you will lose those meetings during the summer. As Commissioner Wang said earlier, she has some school concerns that she has to deal with as the year proceeds. And other advisory bodies are meeting through the summer. So I am puzzled by that. And you've formed 2 new subcommittees that will need to work in short order. So I guess my request is that you reconsider those 2 months and consider having meetings at the time. Also, the work plan, I have to go back to these notes, but the work plan doesn't show anything for the March meeting. Everything is in April, May, and September, October. So that part's a little bit confusing too, like what work is going to happen in which months during the rest of the year. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to check if any other members of the public have questions or comments. It looks like that was it, so I'm going to close public comment on this. I wanted to see if anyone had any points of clarification or comments. Assistant City Manager Ramberg.
Yes, again, apologies for the lapse in process. I'm glad that the member of the public was able to speak to that item. It's certainly your prerogative to reconsider that motion, but I would suggest that you have the option, if needed, to add meetings. And those would then be special meetings as opposed to regular meetings. I also would note that subcommittees can continue to meet whether or not the board is having its regular meetings during the summer.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That was actually going to be my question, if subcommittees could go ahead and meet. And then conceivably, if there was something urgent, we could call a special meeting. How much advance notice, Assistant City Manager Ramberg, do we need to give to call a special meeting?
The notice to the public is a 24-hour required notice for special meetings. It's actually shorter than the regular meeting. Doesn't mean that we don't still strive to provide additional notice to the public. Okay. In terms of the logistics, if it's something that requires preparation of a staff report, and then it would just need to be backed up sufficiently from the meeting date to be able to be prepared for it.
Got it. Thank you. Would it be appropriate, Assistant City Manager Ramberg, do we need to revote, or
you do not need to revote?
Okay. Does anyone have any further comments or questions on this topic, or any reconsideration of the dates? I'm personally comfortable to be able to call a special meeting if we need one, and I'm expecting the subcommittees to continue on and then advise if there needs to be a gathering of all of us, and I'm comfortable with that. Okay, if no one else has any other comments, then we will move on to the last item of tonight's meeting, which is the updated fiscal year 2021-22 Public Safety Advisory Board Work Plan. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So this work plan is brought to you as an information item. No action is required by the commission. It's simply updating you around some changed dates, some of which are related to the fact that we didn't meet in January, so certain items got moved a little bit later. And then the substantive, and those are all marked in red on the staff memo for item 5.5. The more substantive change, which is the addition of content for your consideration, for your work plan, is the review and input on the procedure manual for the school resource officer program. That was a direction that came from the city council when it considered the item on January 25th. And so the timing for that is to be determined. Captain Canfield and I have talked about the next steps around both the creation of an MOU and the development of the procedure manual. And we can provide an update on the timing for when that would come to the PSAB when we have that information.
Do we have any sense right now, Assistant City Manager Ramberg, of timing for MOU and Captain Canfield timing for the manual? Do we have any sense of or any expectations?
So I'll take the first pass at that answer. Is that we don't have a timeline developed. We are going to meet internally to map out the steps and do our outreach to the school district and begin the work on incorporating the direction of the city council, which incorporates the recommendations of the PSAB in some ways that were very concrete about terms for the MOU, and also included some very specific things around what should be worked into the procedure manual. What we don't really have are times that are set to that, and that there are some things that are not completely within our control. I know that Captain Canfield can speak more specifically to some steps around the procedure manual. And I would add that we want to do both of those things in parallel to make sure that they are consistent with each other. And that does add a little bit more uncertainty as to the timing. But that it would be ideal to have things by the beginning of next school year. I'm just not sure that we can commit to that. We're certainly striving to have that done as quickly as possible. And then Captain Canfield, would you like to say more about where we are? Because we've begun the work on the procedure manual already.
Happily. So we've been doing research ongoing now as to the types of content that should be in the procedure manual based on the recommendations and the conversations that have been had heretofore, both by the city council and PSAB subcommittee's work and PSAB's work as a whole. We're working on the creation of a kind of deft and passionate internal work group to help drive the creation, the final product of this procedural manual. Right now, we have some rough drafts, both of kind of what should be on it and input from personnel who would like to be part of that work group. Once that's completed, that work group will review and kind of create a loose draft, drawing on the work that's been done as was discussed previously, and then taking that rough draft for an internal review, and then taking that internal review to the PSAB for recommendations, revising the recommendations, and then taking them to the chief for his approval. That's kind of a lot of steps, but it does move, potentially as these things move kind of parallel and together. There are a lot of overlapping steps, both with the MOU and with the manual, that although there's a lot of them, they'll move together for virtually all of them, I think.
And Captain Canfield, is that passionate internal group also the group that's going to be looking at the metrics?
Yeah, those are going to be things that are absolutely encompassed in the larger project of the manual. So short answer is yes, and it'll be heavily influenced by school resource officers. However, we also want to have some non-school resource officer input and potential future school resource officer input as well.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the board have any clarifications they'd like to make, questions at this point? Okay, thank you. I am going to open it up to public comment. Do any members of the public have anything they'd like to mention on this topic? going in. We do have one person with their hand raised. Dana Pedig, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is Dana Pedig on behalf of MVCPRA. I just wanted to flag a different concern about one of the other items on the work plan, specifically the presentation about the budget. I see that the only place the budget is mentioned on the work plan is PSAB receiving a presentation in April or May. And it makes me wonder, what are the goals or the outcomes of receiving this presentation, especially so late in the fiscal year? I've been at almost every meeting about PSAB since it was very first proposed to City Council, and every step of the way, I feel like I've heard really clear feedback from City Council, from the public, and from a lot of people who ended up on PSAB itself, that we really need a deep dive to carefully examine the budget in greater detail and have opportunities for feedback and conversation. A single presentation doesn't really seem like it's going to provide that opportunity, especially so late in the fiscal year. By April or May, we've heard time and time again that at that point, things are really set in stone around the budget, because the budget has to go to council for final approval in June. So it's really hard to incorporate any feedback or make any changes at that time. This budget topic seems a lot more time sensitive than the other items on the work plan, which will be ongoing for many months throughout the summer. And I don't really see anything in the work plan scheduled for the March 24th meeting. So I was just wondering if it would be possible to schedule something on this item sooner in order to allow for more formative input from PSAB before final decisions get made and preparing the budget for June. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more hand raised in the meantime. Tim McKenzie, go ahead.
I would.
Whoops. Did we lose Tim?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to echo what was just said. Like when we first spoke up in June 2020, it was we're too late into the budget process to be able to have an impact. Last year during 2021, it was like, oh well, hey, let's let PSAB start doing something. And now it seems like a presentation is going to be happening after a lot of the decisions have already been made. I've done a lot of advocacy work as an academic worker at Stanford. And it's something that I saw trying to bring things forward to decision makers and people who control the budget. By the time the budget itself is coming forward, a lot of those decisions have been made, and to really be able to have substantive impact with the feedback that's provided needs to be at an earlier process. And I know during the council meeting in January, the mayor was worried about having more opportunities to talk about the SRO program, specifically because he was aware that the budget is something that repeatedly comes up, and that was worried about not really having, with public sort of wanting to talk more about that. So I just want to really echo and highlight that call.
Thank you. We do have one more member of the public with their hand raised. Alex Brown, go ahead.
What they said. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Do members of PSAB have any additional comments or thoughts after that round of public comment? Vice Chair Frink?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that folks recognize that this body, this board, is going to exist for the foreseeable future. And so it's not, I don't feel any pressure to feel like I have to impact the budget this year. Like, we need to learn things about it. We need to learn how it works, how it reacts. And there's time to do it in the future. We have time to do work here. And so I don't feel like there's this pressure that I have to do it all this year. And so I just wanted to sort of make sure everybody understands that our work is going to be going forward for, for the foreseeable future, that we have time.
Thank you. Other comments from the board at this point? I have one. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, sorry. I feel like I want to give you an acronym or something. I'm going to mess it up at some point. It's like a lot of words.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Is there an, I think we had discussed at some point that there might be an opportunity for the board to be walked through the current budget in anticipation of the next fiscal year budget coming and us not having to kind of play catch up, but are also already understanding kind of how the budget is set up, how it works, kind of, if you will, kind of a 101 before we actually get a chance to look at the proposed new budget. Is that still something you're thinking about?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, since you and I had the chance to talk about this, I have given some thought to, what information do we as staff have and when do we have it? And then also, what is it that the council, and having put this item on the PSAB's work plan, what is it that they asked for? And the way that it's worded was the motion that was made and approved by the council was for the PSAB to receive a presentation. It wasn't for the PSAB to recommend a budget to the city council or to the city manager. Mm-hmm. And so I think that to me feels like important context for, how deep the dive is and what is the outcome of that assessment or review by the PSAB. I know that that's not necessarily what some members of the public have been advocating for, but that is the direction that came from the city council. So with that context in mind, I think that there certainly is value to the PSAB learning about what is the police department budget, what's in there, and that's both kind of the different services that it funds as well as the different cost factors. I mean, spoiler alert, police is heavily, is a service that is heavily personnel dependent. So the vast majority of the expenses are personnel related. But just really getting a chance to do that, I think that there's definite value in that. And that could be potentially at March. I'd have to talk with not only Captain Canfield, but Chief Shung about that and their ability to be ready to do that next month. And then we won't actually have a proposed budget until June. Usually the city manager reviews everything that comes from the departments, decides what there is fiscal capability to do. And not every department will have significant changes from one budget to the next. And so one of the things that I could also see if it would be helpful is being able to give an update of what would be likely to change from if the PSAB were to be reviewing the fiscal year 21-22 budget on the earlier side of things, be that March or April. Then by June, when things are coming together to be proposed to the council, what would change? Like, so for example, we build in whatever cost of living adjustments are agreed to for all of our employee groups. And, sometimes there are increments on different supplies and services. And if there's something that is significant, like a proposal to increase a staff position or to start a new program, those all would be changes that would be different from what could be presented now. And as I said, not every department has those kinds of things other than the things that are just across the board in terms of recommending any staffing change or any new programs. So my suggested approach would be for me to coordinate with the police chief and Captain Canfield around when they could be available and ready to present the current year's budget. And then I can look at how best to bring to the PSAB any things that would be updated in the proposal that would be different from what you would have seen in that presentation of the current fiscal year.
Okay, I think that sounds reasonable. Thank you for looking into that. Any other comments or questions from members of the board on the work plan updates? Okay, So with that, we are moving on to section 6, which is advisory board staff comments, questions, and advisory board reports. No actions will be taken on any questions raised by the advisory board at this time. So does anyone have any comments or questions that haven't already been covered that they would like to mention at this point? Okay, I don't see anything. So if there is nothing else, then I think we can move to adjourn.
I so move.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. All in favor of adjourning? I'm assuming unanimous. All right. All right. Have a nice evening. It's lovely to see everyone again and look forward to working with you all this year.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good night.